Erev Tov, everybody. Starting a new book, Devarim, book of Deuteronomy. That's how it's called in English. What's the meaning of the word Deuteronomy? Nicht. But this is what it's called in English, Deuteronomy. If anybody knows the meaning of Deuteronomy, you could put it in the text box on the bottom. Devarim is a very unique book. It's called Sefer Abris, the book of the covenant. It's the last 3 months of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. Moshe Rabbeinu is giving his final sermon to the Jewish people, giving him his last direction before the entering to Eretz Yisrael. Moshe is reviewing with the Jewish people a lot of what happened in the 40 years in the desert and reviewing the incidents in the desert. He's giving over a lot of the mitzvahs that some of them is a repetition, some of them there is an addition mitzvahs. And Chumash Devarim is one long book from beginning till the end. There's actually a custom the night before Simchas Torah. We have a custom to read the entire Chumash Devarim from beginning till the end because it's really one parsha. It's one sermon. I mean, it was divided into sections, but really it's one long read that starts now and will end, God willing, on Simchas Torah. So the custom is that the night before Simchas Torah, Shana Rabbah, Hasidim especially are awake all night long, and we read from beginning of Eila Advarim all the way till Vazei Sabrocha to really bring it out to all completion. Every verse in Chumash Devarim, you could give classes and lectures. I mean, you could repeat lectures and classes you gave in previous parshas because there is so much of the repetition of the things that were said in the previous parshas. What caught my eye right in the beginning of the parsha of the week, and I made myself notes as I was learning the chitas on Sunday, was the way Moshe begins his sermon. You know, when you learn how to speak, some of you maybe learned how to give a public address, a public talk. Usually when you start talking to an audience, you begin with a nice joke. You begin with flattering the people you're talking to. You say some nice things about, asking permission, showing a sign of humility. I mean, the idea of really bringing yourself close to the audience in order to be able to address them. Moshe Rabbeinu begins his sermon in a very unconventional way. He begins his sermon with a rebuke. Imagine yourself, the rabbi gets up to talk, and without a smile, without a good morning, without saying good Shabbos to anyone, he starts berating the crowd. You start telling them off about what they did, what they didn't do. I mean, would be appropriate when Moshe Rabbeinu gets up to speak. They should be a little bit of a little part of the Parshah, a little charming, some words of kindness, some words of inspiration. So he goes in straight to the rebuke, straight to the words, very harsh words. So, since this is what catches your eye when you begin, so I looked into the Rashi and I was able to find a very beautiful lesson, a very insightful lesson about the whole topic of how to tell off someone, how to rebuke someone. We learned from Moshe, and I was able to come up between the Rashis, the first few Rashis of the Parsha, I was able to come up with 8 lessons how to interact with the person that you really want to tell them off. And each one of those 8 lessons is invaluable. I mean, this is priceless. How to give over words, how to criticize someone in a way that not only it doesn't turn him down, it doesn't make him feel less of a human being, that this criticism becomes constructive, this criticism becomes something that gets imbued and accepted, and it's actually going to be a life-changing experience. And the criticism is so powerful and so positive that the sermon begins with this criticism. So let me first of all read for you the first couple verses in the Parshah. Those of you who have a Chumash could open up Chumash Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 1, verse 1. Begins with the words, Eile hadvarim asher diber Moshe kol Yisrael be'ever hayarden, ba'midbar, ba'arava, moil suf, ve'im paran, uve'im teufel, ve'lavon, v'chatzeros, ve'dizov. These are the words that Moshe addressed to all Israel on the other side of the Jordan. Through the wilderness, in the Arava, near Suf, between Paran and Teufel, Lavan, Chatzeros, and Dizahav. Next verse, Achadas Yoyim Michorev Derech Arsei Rat Kodesh Barnea. It is 11 days from Chorev to Kodesh Barnea by the Mount Sinai, by the Mount Seir route. Achrei hakoisoi esichoin melech oy moiri asher yoshev v'cheshboin v'es oig melech haboshan asher yoshev v'ashteres b'idrei. After, when was that speech? When was that address given to the Jewish people? After he had defeated Sichon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Cheshbon, and King Og of Bashan, who dwelt in Ashtaroth and Edrei. Now, Rashi begins right away with the first words, Eile hadvarim. And Rashi says, because these are words of rebuke, he counted over here a list of places. We all saw a list of places. Places were not really next to each other. And this is all the places where the Jewish people angered God. And this is why it says Eile hadvarim. He just uses the term, these are the words. Doesn't say what is the words. Vehiskiram beremez, Rashi says, Moshe Rabbeinu mentioned those places in a form of a hint. He didn't even say what happened in those places. He actually said it in a way of like hinting all those places. Because of the honor and respect of the Jewish people. So first thing Rashi says to us, that the words, the Moshe Rabbeinu is rebuking the Jewish people, and he's going to tell them words, harsh words. Rashi says, Eile hadvarim. Eile hadvarim means, the word dvarim means, and the way the Kliyakar emphasizes it, Eile hadvarim means organized words. Moshe didn't just come up the way sometimes when we are telling off someone or we are upset about something and we want to give criticism. We come and we just lash out after months and months of holding it in because we didn't want to ruin the atmosphere in the house. So we held in that words of criticism and then somehow we just let it out. Moshe Rabbeinu on the other end, it's Eile hadvarim. It's organized words that Moshe Rabbeinu is organizing it in a way that it's not going to hurt the Jewish people. It's actually going to be words that he's going to say very strong words of criticism, reminding them about the places that they angered God, hoping to arouse by them a sense of tshuva and awakening, not to repeat those behaviors again once they enter to the land of Israel. He's preparing his words very diligently because of the honor of the Jewish people. And right here you see that the first step towards giving constructive criticism is to be thoughtful. It shouldn't be something that is built up. Yeah, you see something wrong in your spouse, you see something wrong with your children, you see something wrong with your worker, with your employee, with your neighbor. and you don't want to ruin the atmosphere between both of you because it's a beautiful evening, so I'm not going to say anything. Goes through a couple of days, that happens again. Okay, it's time to go to bed tonight. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to hold in my feelings. And then what happens at the end? Finally, there comes a moment where you can't anymore take it. So you just let him know exactly what you feel about his behavior. And you wonder why nothing happens. The opposite. The person gets all defensive. He yells back at you. Even though you were so seriously and you were so harshly expressing. It is because it was not Eile Hadvarim. It wasn't organized words, thoughtful words that came from a place of thinking, that it doesn't overrun the honor and dignity of the person you're talking to. So the first lesson of constructive criticism is Eile Hadvarim. Make sure that it's not being said in a surprising manner. Make sure it's done prepared. So if you have to give criticism to someone, make sure the person you're talking to is ready to hear you. Make sure the person you're talking to is not surprised by that expression of such strong feelings, and you organizing the words in an organized way, making sure that the honor and dignity and space of the person who is going to hear from you the criticism is ready to hear it. Another thing Rashi told us here. Hiskirom beremez. Moshe just hints. He doesn't go on and on and on and on the way sometimes when we want to criticize someone, we go and we have a whole write-up and a whole description. Moshe Rabbeinu knows that the Jewish people know that they sinned. Every human being, when he does something bad, he knows that he did something bad. If your child is doing something bad, don't think for 1 second that your child doesn't know that what he did is bad. When you do something bad, you know you're doing something bad. Trust your spouse and trust your children that when they do something bad, they know too. So Moshe Rabbeinu teaches us here an invaluable lesson, priceless, that when you have to tell your child about his behavior that is wrong, don't give speeches. Moshe Rabbeinu says one word. He says the word Bamidbar. That's it. In the desert. And the Jewish people right away remember their associative mind is active. And they know that when Moshe says Bamidbar, Rashi tells us to remind them right away the time when they turned to God and they said when Moshe Rabbeinu took them out, he says, we rather, why did you make us die in the desert? They knew right away what he was referring to. When he said Moil Suf, facing Yam Suf, everybody knew that Moshe Rabbeinu is referring to the complaining that happened right before crossing the Sea of Reeds, before crossing Yam. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't have to go on and describe what happened and repeat the event and the occasion. He said the word Moil Suf, and everybody understood right away what that word means there. Everybody understood. What is he referring to? So here we have another lesson. The lesson of rebuke by using hints, rather by being elaborative, explanatory, using descriptions to describe what happened and go on about the sin and the gravity of the behavior. And you know what happens when you do it to your children? They just completely tune out. They don't hear what you say. They're just looking at your expression. And obviously when it says with anger, the only thing they see or hear is the anger. They don't even hear what you say. But sometimes just the hint, saying one word resonates. It reminds them immediately, puts them on a pedestal and gives them the ultimate understanding that was not okay. Another lesson. El Kol Israel. Moshe is talking to all Israel. comes Rashi and teaches us another valuable lesson. Rashi says, why does it say all the Jewish people? He spoke to all the Jewish people. Says Rashi, if he would only rebuke some of them, those who weren't attending that rebuke would say to those who heard it, why didn't you answer back? There is stuff you can answer back for those criticism. What happens when we are getting criticized? What's our natural reaction? We answer back. You going to tell me about this that I'm not organized? Look at your side of the room, how it looks. You going to tell me that I'm not religious? Look how you are davening. When is the last time you davened in the same spot? Yeah, that's how we respond to criticism, because we are looking for a defense to be able to feel safe, to feel protected, not to feel less of what we always feel about ourselves. So there would be some people who would say, you were standing there when Moshe was rebuking you and you didn't answer back. You could have answered them about what he did and what God did. So Moshe Rabbeinu knew that he wants to rebuke the Jewish people. He needs to have all of them, everybody attending. So if anybody has anything to say, he should have an opportunity to answer it together when everyone is there. The idea of criticizing someone in a way where the one who's being criticized feels that he's part of a dialogue, not a monologue. Many times when I want you to sit down and listen to what I have to say. How many times do you do that? I hope never. I want you to sit down and you're going to sit there for a couple, and I'm going to tell you exactly what's on my mind. Okay? That human being is diminished. Now he's just there feeling that he's in a place where he's going to have to listen to a lecture. So even if you're going to use a few words and you're going to do something really short, the way the first advice from Moshe's rebuke is, many times the person who is there feels that he doesn't have a chance to be dialoguing. Expressing is respond to this. When someone cannot answer and someone cannot be part of the dialogue of the criticism that he gets, the human being automatically is being put in a position where he's diminished. He feels less of a human being. So Moshe makes another thing. He says, I want to have everybody. So if anybody needs to answer back, if someone needs to reply or call me out or tell me that I'm wrong, I don't want him later on to say, I should have been there. So I would have answered. So I would have been part of the conversation. The human being has to feel that when he's being rebuked, he has to be part of a conversation. So again, just to summarize what we said till now, because there is many, many more valuable lessons. I hope someone is taking notes, because I did. First of all, Eile Hadvarim, the idea of preparing yourself, coming to say the constructive criticism, not as an instinct, not as a blotting out some anger or some bottled in stuff that you didn't express, rather than preparing yourself mindfully, thoughtfully, even methodically, to be able to say those words should resonate in an organized way. Number two, short words, hints. Don't go on and on about what happened. Sometimes it's enough to say a name of a place to remind the person exactly what you're referring to. Number three, doing it in a situation, in an environment where the person feels that he could answer. He could be part of a dialogue about what he's being criticized, rather being in a position where he's defenseless, where he's feeling hopeless and helpless. And the only thing he has to do is just sit there and listen to you monologuing and going on whatever is upsetting you or whatever you feel. has to be correct. And here I come to another lesson that Rashi teaches us. Rashi says on the following verse, verse number 3. Vayehi be'arboim shana be'ashteosar chodesh be'echad lachodesh. It was on the 40th year, on the 11th month, on the first of the month. Diber Moshe el bnei Yisrael. Moshe spoke to the children of Israel. Kechoil asher tziva Hashem o Yisrael. Comes Rashi and it says, why do we have the date here that it was on the 40th year, the 11th month, on the first of the month? Says Rashi, Moshe Rabbeinu was waiting with the criticism till right before he passes away. And Rashi says, who was Moshe Rabbeinu's Rebbe? You know, Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest Rebbe, but every Rebbe needs to have a Rebbe too. Who was Moshe Rabbeinu's Rebbe? Says Rashi, Mimi Lamad, where did he learn about that you wait till before you pass away to give words of rebuke and criticism? Says Rashi, Moshe learned that from Yaakov. Yaakov, those of you who remember, in the end of the book of Genesis, what does Yaakov do? Very similar. He gathers all his children and he's telling them about some very harsh words, words of rebuke as well, talking about their future. And over there also you see the idea of inviting all of them together. Kavetsu, Veshimu, Bnei Yaakov, he wants all of them to be standing side by side, not each one individually. Everybody's invited. And Yaakov goes through son after son, and each one he tells them, some of them get some very harsh words of rebuke. Why did Yaakov do it? What was the idea behind rebuking right before passing? Says Rashi, Yaakov says, Omar, Yaakov said, Reuven, my son, I will tell you why I did not criticize you all the years. You know, if you want your child to be better, you should criticize him right away when you see him doing bad behavior. Why did I wait till now, till my passing, to criticize you? You gotta hear what Yaakov says. This is Yaakov, the father of all fathers, the one who teaches us how to be a father. What does Yaakov say? Why did I hold my criticism towards you till now, till before I'm going to die? Are you ready for this? I don't want you to abandon me and go join Esau, my brother. Do you hear what's going on over here? Yaakov, as his oldest son Reuven, a tzaddik, a neshama of a tzaddik, he knows who Reuven is. Yaakov holds his criticism from his son because he knows criticism creates a distance. You can't help it. When you criticize someone, and you could be the master of criticism, it creates a distance between you and the one you criticize. And Yaakov is afraid that his son Reuven will be maybe deriving that his father doesn't like him. Maybe his father is not so loving towards him. Maybe his father is not so approving of who he is. And he's going to go seek approval and love by Esau. When you criticize your child, will you take in consideration that some could be, and it's possibly that you're going to use words that will cause your child to go off the derech, off the path, because of your criticism? So you'd rather see your child living a life that is not aligned with your way of looking at things. He might be eating not the type of food that you approve in your house. He might be doing some questionable behaviors that you don't approve from a religious perspective or a moral perspective. And you're willing to hold the criticism for 100 years from the fear that the distance, Yaakov is afraid that if I'm going to tell you, you might go and join Esav on the other side of the train tracks. I don't know if we understand. Some of us will know what's happening with children who are going off the beaten track. We know about children who go off the path of Judaism. Those of us who try to raise religious kids. What a message about constructive criticism. What a message. Moshe is waiting 40 years to say a harsh words to the Jewish people because he learned from Yaakov that Reuven might join Esav. Reuven might find more love and acceptance by Esav's family, where everything is against the rules and everything is against the law. So I rather them live in my home. And I'm not going to criticize him because maybe that distance will cause him to join Esav and his family. Wow. This is now when you take that in consideration before you're going to tell your child something, you caught him doing something that's not okay, or you saw your child misbehave, and you're 100% sure that he's not okay and is not behaving properly. Taking that in consideration, am I creating a distance between me and my child in a way that it's not going to be reversible? Now, I know, and you know, many, many people who are crying to bed at night, worrying what happens with their children. Why are the children not home? Who knows who they're hanging out with? And that could have been avoided if the child wouldn't have been criticized at home. He would be feeling accepted and loved and welcomed, even when he does things that are not so okay. And Rashi continues and he says, there are 4 reasons why that time was the appropriate time for criticizing his son. First of all, says Rashi, when you criticize a person then, and he knows he's going to pass away, you know that you're not going to be criticizing him again. It's only going to be a once criticism. Rashi is hinting to us about the importance to avoid repetitive criticism. You know, you keep on complaining to your child and criticizing him or your spouse on the same thing over and over. It's called nagging. It's not called criticizing, and it's not constructive. You're nagging. And Moshe says that he rather criticize him once. If it's effective, it's going to be effective with one word. Once. And this is why he does it right before he passes away. So he doesn't have to repeat that criticism again. Now Rashi says a second thing, another teaching. Because he knows he's going to pass away, he knows that he's not going to see them again. Something happens when you criticize someone, and it's sometimes unavoidable. The person you criticized, when he sees you, you trigger a memory of shame and guilt. So every time that person that you criticized, and you did it very positively and very effectively, but every time he sees you, he remembers. You know, but I see teachers of mine that I went to school with, and I remember when they caught me or they were criticizing me in front of the class or they criticized me in any criticism, I know that they know my weaknesses. So when I see them again, unfortunately, the memory that's being triggered is, this is a person who I was criticized by. I don't feel so secure. I don't feel so accepted with people that I maybe was able to show a better side of myself, who didn't have to criticize me in my life. So Moshe Rabbeinu knows, because he's going to pass away, this is going the last time he's going to see them. So not only he's not going to have to do it again, he's not going to have to look at them again. They're not going to have to look at him and remember, this is the person who criticized me. So we have 3 reasons. Number 1, he waited till now so they don't join Esav. They don't go off the beaten path. Number 2, so they don't see him again and they don't get embarrassed and feeling shameful, because he will remind them of the sin that they did. Number 3, that he doesn't have to repeat it again. But there is a 4th reason that is very obvious. And Rashi brings how King David rebukes his son, King Solomon, before he passes away. At the time when a person passes away is the most authentic moment in a person's life. No one thinks for 1 second that he lays a man on his deathbed and is going to die, that he has any ulterior motives. Sorry, what's the word? Ulterior motives. Usually when we hear criticism and we're being rebuked, sometimes we look at the person who is giving us the rebuke and we're thinking, he most likely has some type of a motive why he is telling me so harshly about changing my behavior. By making him feel uncomfortable. He's probably being asked by his friends in synagogue, why don't you tell your son to behave? So we feel sometimes that the one who is criticizing us has some other motives why he's doing that. When a person is laying on his deathbed, we know that that's a moment where there is no personal interest. It only means our well-being. That's the time and space where the atmosphere is an atmosphere of peace, an atmosphere of, he probably is the most authentic and the most real that you'll ever be in your life, if possible, in that moment. So far, we learned 4 lessons just from this verse that tells us that Moshe did it before his passing. No ulterior motives, not repeating the rebuke. He doesn't have to see again. They don't have to see again the one who will remind them of their sin. And awaiting and holding in that rebuke and holding in that criticism with an assurance that if I'm not knowing that if I would have done it while I was alive, maybe he would go and join Esav, my brother. But there is one more lesson, and then we're going to bring it all together. Lesson number 8. Acharei, verse number 4. Acharei hakoisoi, when does he do this rebuke? Acharei hakoisoi esicha in melecho in moiri asher yoshev becheshbon, ves oig melech haboshan asher yoshev ve'ashtares. After he finishes killing, beating Sichon, the king of the Amorites, who settles in Cheshbon, and Og, the king of the Bashan, who lives in Ashtaroth and Edrei. Says Rashi, another valuable lesson about criticism. Oh, my Moshe. Moshe says, if I rebuke them before they go into the land, what would they say? What good did this man do to us? He couldn't even bring us into the land, and he's already rebuking us, probably finding an excuse why to be upset on us, so he doesn't have to fulfill the promise of bringing us into the land. But now that he finished fighting for him the war, he killed Og Melech HaBashan, and he killed Sichon Melech HaMoili. He fought two major battles for the Jewish people, and the entire land of those two great kings was given to the Jewish people. He already started the process of inheriting the land. Now it was appropriate to give them words of rebuke. What does it mean? When you are going to criticize someone, the first question in the person who is the recipient of your criticism is, 1 second, who are you to criticize me? When is the last time you did something good for me? The only thing I hear from you all day is complaining and criticism. This is one of the responses. Maybe you hear it in your life. Maybe it sounds familiar. If you want to be able to criticize someone, you must begin with that person feeling that you really care. You care for his well-being. You always care. So Moshe is waiting till he finishes showing them. Now you have to understand, there is manna for 40 years. He got forgiveness for the golden calf. He did a lot of stuff for these people. He's their Rabbi, he's their leader for a long time. You would think he's entitled to criticize. He's 120 years old. The man has a long track record. He should be able to criticize. No. Moshe knows it's not enough. It's not enough to be 120 years on Moshe Rabbeinu to have the permission to get up on your podium, on the pulpit, and start criticizing the Jews. No, it doesn't work that way. After he does such an act of kindness, after they saw how he slaughters Og Melech HaBashan, the way the Medrash describes how he did it, and he ran in front of him in the battle against Sichon, the king of the Amori, and he divides the land, and he's giving them the inheritance, like we learned in Parshas Matos and Masei, what Moshe does to them. Now that they were so favored by Moshe was showing them so much giving and so much acceptance and so much good. Now they were willing to listen. 8 promising lessons, powerful lessons about how to talk to someone and expressing to them criticism. I'm going to make a short synopsis of all of that, but I want to give a little bit of an introduction. And I want to talk a little bit more practical, so we're able to relate and really connect to this topic, because this is a heavy duty topic. There is a mitzvah in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 17. The mitzvah is Hocheach Tochiach et Amitecha. It's one of the 613 commandments. Rebuke, you shall rebuke your fellow. Let me open up the Chumash. It's very important to see the words inside, because the verse inside gives us a whole insight to be able to really understand how rebuke needs to be done. Leviticus 19. Parshas Kedoshim. This is the Parsha that has in it so many mitzvahs. The verse begins with the words as follows. Lo isisna es achicha bilvavecha. You shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. Ocheach tochiach es amisecha. Reprove your kinsmen, and the word is written twice. Hocheach tochiach. So we learn that you can do it multiple times. If you want to make sure that someone behaves in the proper way, make sure to reprove him as many times as you can. And the verse completes with the words, veloisiso olav chet. But make sure that no guilt becomes because of you. So it seems like, even though it's two different mitzvahs. There's one mitzvah, one prohibition is you're not allowed to carry hate or a grudge towards someone in your heart. There's another mitzvah, you should rebuke someone. This is a negative commandment, this is a positive commandment. It seems like when it's written in one verse, there is some type of a message over here. And the message is, obviously, number one, before you're going to give words of rebuke, before you're going to do the mitzvah of Eicheach Techiach Esam Yisrael, number one, make sure that there is no hate in your heart towards that person. Loisisna es achicha bilvavecha is an introduction to Eicheach Techiach Esam Yisrael. So before you're going to rebuke, before you're going to criticize, sit down with yourself and check in with your heart. Make sure that your alignment, that you are not coming from a place of prejudice, a place of personal anger towards that person. There's no hate in your heart. You're coming from the purest place in you to do this act of rebuke. Now, what does it say in the end of the verse? Guilt shouldn't come to your friend as a result of your rebuke. Remember what we said about Yaakov waiting till he dies, being afraid that if I will criticize, what I will cause, it will be a greater sin of what it was done. What if I criticize, Reuven might go and join Esau, my brother. So when you're going to criticize someone, make sure you criticize him in an environment that doesn't cause the person to go and sin just because he was criticized. Ethics of our fathers tell us that you shouldn't criticize a person at the moment of his sin. Yeah? You're walking by your teenager's bedroom and you hear some noise, and you get very outraged, and you want to just open up the door and storm in and tell him exactly how bad is what he's doing right now. You know what's going to happen as a result of that. You're causing him to sin intentionally from now on. This was maybe an act of lunacy, a moment of weakness. If you barge in and you go in and you scream and you do this whole sin, you are actually causing that next time, or maybe even right there, that sin is going to become something that he's going to do intentionally. Al toichiach es chavercho b'shas chetoi. Don't rebuke your friend at a time when he's actually sinning. Wait. Because sometimes coming in with that energy and rebuking someone at that moment, that will come out as a result, that will be the indication, the reason why he carries a wound, why he's having an injury of that sin. How many times you sit with people, I sit with people, and you find out that the reason why they're repeatedly behaving in a certain way is because they were hurt. There was something very hurtful happen about this behavior that causes them to come back to the behavior again and again and again. If that person would have known, it would have held back his criticism and wait for the right time and the right place, as we learned. The many advice that we have, the multiple of advice that we got of how rebuke should be done properly. So the introduction is, make sure your heart is pure. And make sure when you rebuke him, it doesn't cause him to repeat the sin. You don't cause him to bear a sin because of your rebuke. You're coming from the most righteous, holy place in you. You have no hate in your heart, but it might be the wrong place, the wrong time. Now, you know what is written in the following verse? In verse 18. Don't take any vengeance or bear a grudge against one of your people. And what's the last words? Love your fellow as you love yourself. Because if you rebuke someone with this plan, you begin with removing hate from your heart. And the rebuke is done in a time, in a place, in an environment where there is no repetitive of sin. There is no vengeance involved. There's no grudges involved. You know what's going to happen with that friend? You're going to love him and he will love you. The mitzvah of v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. You know when true love comes to be? When two people could criticize each other and one sees how the other one values him, empowers him, makes him feel great, rather than making him feel less. Because this is one of the most important things about criticism, is when the person who is being criticized feels diminished. The person who is being criticized feels he's less of a human being because he's not as good enough, he's not good enough. There is a verse in the book of Proverbs, chapter 9, verse 8. Al toichach let's penish noecho. Do not rebuke, don't criticize a scoffer. He might hate you. Oicheach lechacham. Criticize a wise man. Veyehavcha. He will love you. What is the meaning of the verse? The book of Proverbs is written about the two characters. There is the let's, the scoffer, or the fool, and then there is the wise one. And King Solomon in the book of Proverbs keeps on going between the scoffer, the fool, and the wise one. And he says when it comes to criticism, don't criticize the scoffer. He will hate you. That's the sin that you're going to cause him to bear. Not only is he going to do the bad things he does, he's going to be hating the one who is rebuking. Rebuke the wise one and he will love you. What does it mean? So there is a beautiful explanation that I saw that explains this verse in such a majestic way. Don't rebuke the scoffer. Meaning to say, when you're rebuking your child, don't call him a scoffer, because he's going to hate you. When you are calling your child with a name, scoffer, sinner, fool, whatever you say after that doesn't make a difference anymore. The only thing that will come out as a result of the rebuke will be hate towards you. Oicheach lechacham. When you rebuke a child, call him wise. Call him a chacham. And he will love you. Not only the words of rebuke will not create that distance between you. How do we say? Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha will come as a result. When you come to your child or to the person you want to criticize and you begin the criticism with emphasizing how great he is, how talented he is, how much you love him, how much you respect him. And you get particular about all the beautiful things that you do see. And then somehow, after going with those words of wisdom and telling him how wise he is and what a chacham he is, then you criticize him. Then he will love you. He doesn't feel that you have violated, invaded his space, came from a place of self-righteousness. You came from a place of deep care and love. And kamayim apanim al apanim, the way you look at someone, that's the way he looks back at you. When you show the child that he's a chacham, then the words of rebuke you're giving him returns with love and the love between you and your child, or between you and the person you're rebuking, becomes more deep and more real and more authentic. But if you're coming to a person from a place of calling him a let's, you're looking at him down, you're looking at the one you're criticizing it is less religious than you, less holy than you, then somehow you see that hate as a result of that. And the problem is not in the person you're talking to. The problem is in you. You didn't do it right. You didn't really mean it. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah says in the Tractate of Erchin, I don't know if in our generation, now this is the generation of Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, he says, I don't know in our generation if there is a man who knows how to criticize properly. Says Rashi, this is in the Tractate of Erchin, page 16, he says, Rashi says over there, is it possible that a person could criticize someone in a respectful way without causing the person's face color to change? Now, we know how important it is constructive criticism. I have never seen a person reading a self-help book or reading a magazine with an article that addresses one of his personal issues, where the person gets so upset that he's reading about this personal issue, they will throw the magazine on the floor, call the magazine and cancel the subscription because they were talking about him. No, it's very interesting. You're reading a magazine that talks about how terrible you are, and you're reading it again, it's like, wow, it's talking exactly about me. And you write down some notes and you make a little note, I need to keep that magazine. This is really personal. Why? It's because the criticism that is given was not given directly to you. This is a magazine, someone wrote an article. Happened to be that you are the one reading that article. Again, when a human being feels that he's attacked by the criticism, when a person feels that he's in some type of a race, his respect against his father's respect, his dignity against his spouse's dignity. Each one is fighting for their dignity. I am a good person and you're a bad person. No, I am a good person. You are worse. When it becomes the struggle, obviously the results of that criticism is hate. I want to mention one more thing. Another thing we learn from Moshe when he criticized the Jewish people. We all know the story, we actually spoke it in the class about the story of Miriam. When Miriam and Aaron are talking about Moshe's wife at the end of Parshas Ba'aloischa. Everybody remembers that. They talk about this, that Moshe is not going back to his wife. Suddenly God appears. And I want you to pay attention the way God is talking to the two sinners, okay? Aaron and Miriam did a sin. They spoke Lashon Hara about Moshe. They're getting punished. Miriam gets punished with leprosy. But I want you to pay attention how God introduces to them, rebukes them for what they did. Vayomer Shimu Nodvor. Hashem turns to Aaron and Miriam and says, Shimu, listen, please listen to my words. And he begins with a whole description about who Moshe is. How prophets are usually. Imi neviachem Hashem b'maroi lo v'svada. Loikin avdi Moshe b'chol beis nemanu. And he's going on, Voyish Moshe onav me'oid, how humble Moshe is. Hashem is giving them a whole little conversation about who Moshe is. And how does it end by the end? It ends, Vayichar af Hashem, Hashem got angry, Vayelach, and he walked away. Now, I want you to just describe yourself how exactly it's happening. God is coming to Aaron and Miriam. And he starts telling them about Moshe, what type of a person Moshe is, the difference between Moshe's prophecy and any other prophets. And when he finishes telling them about Moshe, and he tells them, how come you guys spoke gossip about Moshe? How did you speak gossip about such a person like Moshe? Then it says, God gets angry and he walks away. Should have been the opposite. And God got angry and he came down to Aaron and Miriam and he told them about Moshe. And then he walked away. Instead of that, we have a whole beautiful description about how Hashem views Miriam and Moshe. And only at the end it says, Va'icharaf Hashem, he showed them a sign of anger and he walked away. And the word no, Shimon no devarai, the word no, Rashi says, no means please listen. And Eliyahu Mizrahi, one of the great commentators on Rashi, says, even though God eventually shows them a sign of anger, the whole rebuke was done in such a admiring vayomer. The word vayomer versus vayadaber. Vayomer is always soft words. Vayadaber usually means harsh words. Vayomer, no, please. He was talking in a very calm, in a very accepting, in a very loving way about Moshe. Deep pain about how they are not understanding about different emotions. But eventually, when it comes to the end, then Hashem cringes his nose, Vayicharaf Hashem, and he shows them a sign of it. There is a story with the Frierdiker Rebbe, and I mentioned it in different classes. Frierdiker Rebbe, Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, had to be, at a certain point in his life, he had to be for medical reasons in a hospital. And they were administrating a certain shot that he needed to take for whatever he was going through at that time. It was a form of LAS or one of those similar diseases, neurological diseases. And the doctor was administrating the shot, came into the room, and before he was administrating the shot, he was washing his hands with alcohol. And then he took the space where the needle is supposed to go in, and he washed it also with alcohol, and he made it very clean and very sterilized. And then he took out the needle, and he sterilized the needle with alcohol and made sure it's sterilized from disinfected completely. And then when everything was ready, he had his mask on his face and everything was sterilized. He administrated a shot in and out, and that's it. Frierdiker Rebbe writes in a letter what he learned from that. What he learned, a lesson about criticism. The doctor, before he comes, meaning to say the person who's going to criticize, has to make sure that, first of all, before I'm going to tell you something negative, before I'm going to take a needle and puncture your skin, break your skin, and put in some poison or whatever medical thing I believe will make you better, I have to make sure that I myself, I'm clean. Because if I have any germs, if I have any type of hate in my heart, if I have any type of vengeance or carrying a grudge in my heart, it will infect the needle that I'm going to use. Then you have to make sure that the person you're talking to is ready. Could be you are very sterilized and very clean and very pure, and you're in a perfect place. You're tzaddik right now. But the person you're talking to is not ready to listen. Not the right time for him. He's tired. He's in a bad mood. He had a hard day at work. He has no head. He has no heart. He's not going to hear you. He's infected. Make sure that person is sterilized. The way Moshe does it. Fights for them a war. Makes them the space. Makes them feel comfortable, at peace. Using the right time in the right place. Making sure that they are prepared to receive. And then when you know that you are pure and sterilized, and you know that the recipient is pure and sterilized, in and out. You just do that shot so quickly that the person, he doesn't even feel the pain. It's just the point that we saw with Moshe, using a word, using a name, and that is good enough to give them all the rebuke they need, just reminding the name of the place. This is a very, very important lesson in our life. Very important lesson in our life to take to heart. I want to complete, even though we have 1 minute left for the class, I want to complete with one more word that came to my mind. Moshe Rabbeinu, when he criticizes them, he reminds him of the sin of the golden calf. And he uses the word Vedi Zahav. Says Rashi, Vedi Zahav means enough gold. That's how he describes the sin of the golden calf. Enough gold. What is Moshe doing? He's telling God, the sin of the golden calf was not even your fault. Telling the Jewish people, the sin of the golden calf wasn't even your fault. Vedi Zahav, you had too much gold. So you had nothing to do with it. So there's another element of it that even in the criticism, even when you talk about their sin, you find the virtue. You find the forgiveness. You find the mercy and compassion. That even when you mention something negative, you find a positive layer, a positive element in all of that. So God Almighty help us that when we need to do this, if we ever need to criticize someone, that we should be able to do it in a positive way, in a constructive way, that will bring healing to ourselves, bring healing to the one who's receiving that. And we should always have simchas and nachas. We shouldn't have to criticize one another. We should only be able to say compliments and good words to one another. Have a good Shabbos. Have a good night. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Very
Very
welcome.
good. Very good material.